Welcome everybody to Monday here at Hope for Our Times, and visiting us all the way from the UK is one of our favorite podcasters and people bringing us some great insight. Gary McKibben, pastor of Victory Church in Belfast, is joining us. He's also, by the way, a 7th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, so I don't recommend picking a fight with him. But Gary, this is going to be an outstanding program. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask you to do something. Bring clarity to what is going on over in the UK, because we just get what we see via videos and things like that. And having somebody that's there say, here's what's really going on, here's what you can believe, here's what you can't believe. Because we hear about digital IDs. We've talked before about Online Safety Act. I want to get into that a little bit more. Real threats for you and your ministry. What's going on the streets? We're going to get into all that in just a second because it's a big deal. So, Gary, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me back. I'm looking forward to today.
This is going to be good. By the way, everybody, Gary, right after we're done with this, and again, this is Monday, he's got to get on a plane because he's heading over to the States. And so he's going to be at Kurt Reed's church. Are you there for Sunday church?
Yeah, so I'll be there Sunday 12th. Like we said beforehand, stopping off for a little intercession at the Prophecy Watcher conference, and then straight across to Vegas.
Wow. That's quite a flight. That all starts pretty much right after we finish this podcast. So, oh man, you're going to be so tired. Okay. All right, Gary, let's just jump into it. I'm going to show you a video. You're very familiar with it. We'll show all of our viewers this video. It's a scene that we're starting to get used to if we're paying attention to Bible prophecy and what's going on over in the UK. And I'm going to ask you to, after we're done, to comment on it. And is it really happening? Is it happening very often? Is this a one-off? Are things being blown out of proportion? Are they really bad there? Or is it just being exaggerated? You know, what's really going on? So here's this video, everyone. It's a street preacher over in the UK being hassled by the cops. So let's roll this. We won't show the whole thing, but we'll get an idea of it, and then we'll come back with Gary.
Today we're going to be issuing you with a community protection warning, okay?
What?
Have you heard of one of these before? Do you understand it?
Why are you issuing me
I can go through it if you want, or you can read it. How would you like it?
Well, you're the one presenting it to me,
Yeah,
so I'd like
that's
to tell
absolutely
you.
fine. So choice of words that causes fear and harm to the community.
Choice of words. I'm preaching out of the Bible.
At the end of the day...
Is it illegal to speak out of the Bible? It's not.
It doesn't specify preaching what you want. It's saying that it's just causing an upset to businesses.
You said by the words that I'm speaking directly out of the Bible.
That's absolutely fine, but unfortunately we're getting the calls. CPW, so that's the first thing that we can give you, which is a community protection warning.
Wow,
So if we see you doing it again, we can heighten that to a CPN, which is a community protection notice. That
So you're telling me I'm not allowed to preach in
That
Guildford?
then holds the power of arrest.
So I'm not allowed to preach in Guildford?
So this is an official warning which requires you to stop.
Stop.
Yeah.
You're trying to say that I'm not allowed to preach?
Not here, no.
So what, in the whole of Guildford?
Sussex, that would also cover...
So, Gary, that gives everybody pretty good. I mean, the argument is, so I'm not allowed to preach the Bible? We're giving you CPW, community protection warning, or something like that, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So what's going on? How common is it? Is it being blown out of proportion?
No, it's actually quite common now that you tend to see that. So a lot of this comes off the back of whatever ideology that the complainer holds to. So if that's as a protected class, say it's, for instance, the alphabetic community, which I think in this video it was, because they're deeming it offensive, it falls under part of the Crime and Policing Bill. Now, the Crime and Policing Bill goes back to 1986. However, it's recent adjusting and additions to that bill that have allowed for things that are in the pipeline, things like the respect orders. So the respect orders fall under the class that if you're outside and you're causing what someone considers offense, and that can be fall under the jurisdiction of whether you're too opinionated, too loud, and that you're saying something that perhaps a protected class would object to. So, for instance, if you're reading out of the Bible and you say that marriage is between a man and a woman, and someone walks along and has a problem with that, then what you tend to find is the police will come along, and we've witnessed this on the streets ourselves, and we've witnessed this during Pride Month. There was a street preacher preaching in town, and the crowd that assembled around him decided to take his Bible and start ripping it up in front of him, and the police stood back and watched it, and they didn't get involved, and they didn't say anything about this individual ripping up the pages of the Bible. It was simply because it's kind of what's happening right now is protected classes. That's the so-called narrative, protected classes. So if you're off, for instance, the Islamic community, or you're off the alphabetic community, it seems to be that the dictate coming, certainly this isn't the police themselves, this is the policies that are behind it. And it's being pushed, and the police have been politicized to enforce these things. And what's happening is Judeo-Christian principles or Christian teaching is pushed to the sideline, and the space is given to every other ideology. And we're seeing that more and more now.
So let me ask you this. Are you finding any police? I know you need to be careful, which I want to ask you about what you're saying. This is on the internet. Do you find any police that are saying, that are not willing to enforce it, that are saying, hey, they see this is a free speech issue and they're not going to go along with it?
Yeah, well, pretty much, I would say I've experienced that here because, there's always been sort of a relationship between the church and the policing in Northern Ireland that you're seeing some people unwilling to step in, unwilling to sort of take the reins or try and shut things down. But then what you're seeing as well are the new I'll not say the new police, but the new police force coming through, the younger generation. If you looked at that video there, both of those police were quite young. It's those younger ones coming through that are coming under maybe positive discrimination in terms of hiring. They're hired off a critical diversity sort of index in terms of bringing them in, and they're enforcing an ideology that seems to be, well, from our point of view, the spirit of the age, but certainly the dictate coming from top down, coming from the politicians.
So, okay, we also watch, so we see videos like that. So this is a fairly common thing that's happening. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get to threats, your concerns personally. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But before that, we see where streets, I watch videos. You have people that worship Allah that are going prostrate in the middle of streets, and streets are shut down, and they're able to pray wherever they want.
Yeah.
But if you're a Christian, it doesn't work that way. In fact, you're threatened with arrest. I've seen a few people that have been arrested that have, from what I can tell, because they've been praying and they've been believers. So is this really happening with the Islamization, and the government is really just cowering to them?
Yeah, 100%. We, on after service on Sunday, I had a conversation with someone. It was their first time at the church, and they were telling me that they actually work in a building opposite our church, and they were saying that he's a born-again Christian. However, in his factory, what they've done is they've brought in a lot of people, let's say, new to the country, and they have been dictated their own prayer space, so they've been given a room for their own prayer space. And he decided one day at his break to say the Lord's Prayer, and someone came up to him and said, no, you can't do that. And he said, well, if I can't do it, how come they can do it? And there's this sort of, what it is for me is political correctness is stamped as authority, certainly upon the civilization, and in terms of that seems to be the moral absolute. And if you're coming from a Judeo-Christian principle or a background, or if you're a Bible-believing Christian in a Christian nation, then really what they're expecting from the top down is that you make space for everything else and you remove your right to share your faith and take that into the corner. They don't really want to hear from Christianity. It's certainly perpetuated more in the last few years since October 7th, with the likes of the pro-Palestinian movement, which is massive across the UK. What you're finding as a Christian, and certainly as a ministry, there's a lot of people who will be silent on subjects because they're afraid of the kickback. So they're self-governing themselves with silence, and they're falling into the dictate of the government.
So with you and your church, do you feel threatened that they're trying to pressure you? Are you getting pressure to close your church or anything like that?
Not at the minute. So I've had more issues online than I've had anything else in terms of censorship. In regards to us, our church is quite unique in the sense that we have the sanctuary and we have the welcome area in the front, and then we have behind all of that in another room, we've got a boxing ring, we've got bags, we've got a load of fighters. So if they come through the door, it depends on which room they go into. But the way I look at it, this is kind of the continuation from the C-19 issue, that we did have police come to our doors during that. During the pandemic, we had them come because we were reported by, well, funny enough, we were reported by other Christians, and we were reported for things like, well, one, being open, two, being close to each other and praising God, actually singing. And we had them around multiple times. And to me, this is just now the legislation coming into place that wasn't really there during COVID, but now it's starting to be solidified in the things like what you mentioned at the start, the Online Safety Act, or in what is proposed through the digital IDs. This is going to give them the framework to bring in the tyranny, or what we would see as the building blocks of the beast system, more so than what they had. I see COVID as a dry run for what we're experiencing now.
Yeah, I look at it, what also happened over the last 5.5 years, rapidly approaching 6 years now, it's wild to think of that, is they've been able to figure out where their problems were, the resistance was, how people resisted, that sort of thing. So as I look at it, they're shoring up those things with something like the Online Safety Act and digital ID, which I want to get into in a minute. I'll get into both of those things in just a minute. But before we go there, if you go out on the street preaching, do you look at that as the pressure against you is only going to increase, or do you feel you'll be threatened with arrest?
Yes and yes. So the pressure is going to increase. And again, it comes back to Christianity not being deemed as any way a protective class, whereas everything else seems to be. We've seen certainly preachers being attacked over their stance on Israel on the street. We've seen... So to take it out, we have an outreach team that go out every week, and we just recently been talking about this, the need for more and more security. Things are getting dicey, to say the least. And you're seeing this across the UK. You obviously had the Manchester attack at the synagogue, and that was targeting Jews. But you've also seen near us in County Down, there was a police operation because there were weapons found being brought into a church. Now, this was obviously from someone who was planning something, but they were being brought into a church. And all of these things, basically, if you're going out now and you're sharing the gospel, you've now got to be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. You've got to take security with you, which I never thought we would have to. You've got to be aware of your surroundings, and that's not even when you take into equation the police and their reaction to what you're saying. So for that, again, that individual there who's speaking, if you're saying something and someone just decides that it's offensive, then automatically that puts you on the back foot. Automatically, legally, you're going to be targeted.
Wow. So that's a huge deal, especially coming from somebody that's a 7th degree black belt. And your belt is behind you. I can see that.
Yeah.
And you're saying you got to go out with security. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So basically what they're saying, I mean, you mentioned if you support Israel, it's a problem. Mm-hmm. And then if you speak as a born-again Christian with biblical truth in Christ, those two things are a problem. To me, that alone should cause people to go, I wonder why these two subjects, biblical Christianity and supporting Israel, are such an issue there right now and really in the world. We can see it growing in the U.S., but not like you guys have it. But I think it's just a matter of time as we watch it where we're going to eventually be where you guys are. And you look at this and go, that should be a thing that causes you to be alert. You know, the attack at the synagogue. Why are these such an issue? It's a spiritual dynamic. So essentially everything's okay, but Christianity doesn't pushes back against the narrative, and so does the support of the Jews. That leads me to believe it's a very dark spiritual thing that is taking place. I don't think you have to be smart to figure that out. I think you just got to look and go, well, that's rather interesting. Why those two things?
Yeah, and the problem is most people aren't looking at that. Most people are putting their heads in the sand. And then there's the object of, or the issue, of Christians who have sided with the likes of Palestine and sided with that cause and sided with Hamas and the replacement theology that is as permeated through churches right now. That in itself, you know, I guess that's extra confusion for people when they're looking at what's going on. But certainly, if we're taking a biblical stance, and I think it all boils down to a biblical stance, because it's biblical that I have support for Israel. It's biblical that I pray for the peace of Jerusalem. It is biblical that I realize that I cannot be, as a Christian, the church. The replacement ideology is a fallacy on its own, and you would have to throw out so much of the Bible to actually come to that conclusion. And dispensationalism, again, you have to throw out dispensationalism to say that the church is Israel. And the problem is that those individuals and those, I guess, parts of the church that are doing that are muddying the waters, and it's adding more confusion, because if people were actually seeing who's being targeted, the Christians are being targeted, the Jews are being targeted, well, that's straight off a sign of spiritual warfare, but it's also a sign of demonic Luciferian satanic strategy, right? In the sense that if you look through history, it has always been those two paired together and the attacks upon those two paired together that you start to see, one, the desire of a one world government and the move towards totalitarianism, and two, you see this demonic strategy that would be sort of not out of place in the book of Revelation. So you look at World War II. World War II, attack against Jews, but also attack against Bible-believing Christians. And what rose up at that time? Cheap grace. Cheap grace muddied the waters so that those looking upon it were saying, well, that part of the church, they're okay. They believe that they hate the Jews too. And they're going, and it's that muddying of the waters that I think hasn't allowed for a mass awakening of people to the time and the season that we're in.
Oh, totally agree. As I look at things, when you look at Israel and within the church, why would anybody really care? Why would that be a big deal? If a church teaches that they support Israel, who cares? But apparently it ruffles the feathers of the devil himself, and hence it's gotten really bad here in the U.S. too. I don't know if you've been able to see that, but there's some huge influencers here in the States that have really influenced masses of people that are conservative. The churches are predominantly they're all buying into replacement theology, and I don't even think they know what it is. A lot of them. But you're right. It's the cheap grace, not understanding what the Bible really says, not really, we're all saved, we're all going to heaven. Well, except for you people who support Israel. I mean, it's like, the cheap grace has led to, well, we don't really need to study the Bible, so people don't even know what it says. So when it comes to this dynamic, but what you're talking about is being attacked here in the U.S., not from Online Safety Act yet, not from digital IDs yet, but wow, it's like all I'm doing now is pushing back against these lies regarding Israel. But I mean, who would really care? Why would it be a big deal to you unless it's a threat to you, and it's really only a threat to the devil himself? I find this interesting too, Pastor Gary, is that you go back to the first century. What were the two groups that the Romans were persecuting predominantly? The Christians and the Jews. What happens with Rome 2.0, the revived Roman Empire? Guess which two groups are predominantly starting to be persecuted above the rest? Christians and Jews. And so, okay, I'm going to switch gears for a second and go over to, unless you want to comment on that.
Well, no, the only thing that I'll say is that again, that replacement ideology is without conscience, but it's also without reason. I remember taking a funeral and had somebody come up to me in the funeral while we're about to put the individual, lower the casket down into the ground. And I'm standing there with my Bible about to read, and the individual whispers in my ear, "Do you want to know why the Jews are really demons?" And I was like, not only is that complete nonsense, but you've picked your timing to try and, it was just, so I just wanted to say that. Sorry, carry on.
No, wow, that is just like, and this thought is just taking over churches. It's really, it is, if we have time, I want to come back to it, but let me switch over here. First of all, as we watch, protests are increasing, and I'm guessing a lot of it has to do with the Online Safety Act. You have Tom. I'm a little familiar with Tommy Robinson, but I don't, I don't know him. I don't know what his beliefs are. I don't know if he's a Christian or not. I've heard various reports, but that's kind of how I felt. But he is a leader of the, I guess you would call it the opposition to what's going on coming from the government. I'm guessing, is that somewhat accurate?
In regards to the Online Safety Act, I think the way we sort of look at it now, you did have that march throughout London, but the ship has sailed because it's already enacted. We're already experiencing the after effects of this. So one of the things that I remember sharing is that we lost, I would use Bible Gateway, we lost that for about 3 weeks because the Online Safety Act and the European Digital Services Act wouldn't let it be used on our systems. So we couldn't access anything like that. Now, I don't know what compromise or what has happened for it to be allowed back on, but it is back on. In terms of opposition, there is massive opposition in terms of this government and the government dictate. There are loads of people who do not want the Online Safety Act, and I would say the majority. But there's also this British kind of mentality that, you just stick things out, you don't really complain. So there's a section that are complaining, there's another section that are silent. And I always say silence is compliance. And then there's the section that are initiating all these things like Online Safety Act, the European Digital Services Act in Europe, the new European biometric system that starts on October 12th that we have to use. So I'm preaching in Iceland next month, and I'm going to have to go through that system where I'm fingerprinted, scanned, biometric scanning, all to be part of a global database. All of this is happening. And it's going in one direction, and it needs the silent majority to wake up to it. The Online Safety Act is continuing, and it's going down this route. Now, people are noticing that as the big one, same as the digital IDs, but there's other framework legislation that has come in. So, for instance, with the Online Safety Act, it is meant to be toward really, proving your age when you're going online, that you're able to watch all of this stuff. But when it also comes to things like GDPR, so governance, digital and personal, I can't remember what it's called, but it's all your information. It's basically your online information, GDPR. In May, they lowered that to the age of 13. Now, that to me didn't make any sense. But then when you look at this new digital ID proposal, which is interesting, because when I say it's a proposal, because we don't know if it will go through both houses, it is likely to have support in the House of Commons, because
Okay. So you lost his audio too?
knows. Whenever you look at this, have we lost connection?
Are we good? Okay. Apparently we're back.
Okay. Whenever you look at all of these things coming into play, the digital ID is again proposed for the age of 16 upward. However, if you read through their most recent statement, the government statement, they're talking about reducing it under consultation to the age of 13. So a 13-year-old might have to have a digital ID. Now, the digital ID, the Online Safety Act, when you really look at this, and this is why you were very wise in saying that you don't have these things yet, because when you look at the initiators behind all of this, unfortunately, the majority of them are coming from your side of the pond. So when you look at the Online Safety Act, it came in primarily from lobbying from big tech companies, Larry Ellison, Peter Thiel, Sam Altman, all of those individuals that are very close to the American administration right now. Mm-hmm. The same with the digital IDs. So Larry Ellison is the biggest patron of Tony Blair. So the Tony Blair has the Tony Blair Institute. Now, yes, Tony Blair is our ex-prime minister and he's out of government, but he has an independent think tank, an independent group that is certainly influencing policy. It was Tony Blair who tried in 2009 to bring in digital IDs, and it failed. It cost the population $5 billion for that failure, which, by the way, when you take the consideration that this government is saying this is to stop immigration, $5 billion is 50 times more than what it costs per year to man the borders, to man the small ship crossings, right? So if they had just put the money in there, mm-hmm. all of this idea of it being about immigration is a fallacy, it's nonsense. But what you have is Larry Ellison, head of Oracle, a couple of weeks ago, richest man in the world, and he is the biggest contributor financially as well. He contributed in 2021 $250 million to the Tony Blair Institute. And on the World Governance Summit, Tony Blair and Larry Ellison were talking, and Tony Blair was interviewing him, and he asked him a few questions. Larry Ellison says that we are so close to super artificial intelligence much quicker. It's coming much quicker than people are aware of. So Tony Blair says, well, what do we do about that? And his answer is very telling. He says, governments around the world need to bring in and centralize all of the data. They need to centralize all of the data. And then he started talking about the NHS service in the UK because there's so much data involved in that. 2 weeks later, the Tony Blair Institute brought out a report, how the world prepares for the advancement of AI Well, we need to centralize data. We need to have a centralized data system. This is what digital IDs are. So he brings back a digital ID. Now, yes, this comes in through Keir Starmer, but Tony Blair has an individual called McFadden. She works for him in his Tony Blair Institute. Her husband happened to be the campaign manager for Keir Starmer. And what we see with Keir Starmer is the continuation as a Blairite of introducing all of his policies. Now, for me, this is really, really interesting, right? Because see the digital ID aspect and combine it with the Online Safety Act. All of this is headed to one direction. We look back at 2019 and we start talking about the Chinese social credit system. That is a template of what they're looking for, but it is not fully what they're looking for. So all of the players involved. Sorry, if I'm talking too long.
No, this is very interesting. Keep going. This is really interesting.
So you have, if you take the influencers on this, yes, you've got the building of these tech giants. You've got Jensen Huang, the head of NVIDIA, right? All of these individuals involved. But then you've got the Bank of International Settlements. Now, the Bank of International Settlements is probably a bank that doesn't allow you, it doesn't do home loans, it doesn't do like any sort of activities that a normal bank would. I'm just checking we're still live. It doesn't do any of those different things, right? But what it does is it has 60 central banks that contribute to it. Now, the Bank of International Settlements, are we okay?
We're okay.
Still live?
You cut out a little bit here and there, but we're still going. I don't want you to stop because it's really interesting. So this is very interesting.
Okay. Well, the Bank of International Settlements has a checkered history, but they also have a checkered desire of what they want. They're the group, the most influential bank in the world that wants everybody part of a world ledger. Right? This is called tokenization. So Larry Fink of BlackRock also wants, who's also the interim head of the World Economic Forum, wants tokenization. So what's tokenization? It means everything and every asset and every person is part of a world ledger. In fact, according to the Bank of International Settlements, you and I would be called a soul-bound token. Are actually, like, even spiritually speaking, a soul-bound token. And we could have, again, like the Chinese social credit system, like what we saw in Vietnam recently, 86 million accounts frozen because 43% of the population didn't supply their biometrics for the digital ID, so they froze the accounts. This is the power of the world ledger. So you go into the history of this. The Bank of International Settlements was started in January 1930, and it was originally started to sort of man the reparations from World War I that Germany would have to pay. However, you could not in any way, shape, or planet say that the Bank of International Settlements were doing that job or that they were trying to hinder Germany's advancements. What they did is they added their support to Adolf Hitler. In fact, when Adolf Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia said, right, the Nazis are going to invade. We'll put our gold somewhere safe. We'll give it to the Bank of International Settlements. So they invaded. And Adolf turned around to the Bank of International Settlements and says, I want that. And he says, here you go, Adolf, carry on. And all of this is just touching, like it's like the tip of the iceberg. There's loads behind this. The head of the Bank of International Settlements had individuals involved, like Thomas McKittrick from the US, had Hilmar Schacht. Hilmar Schacht was the head of the Reich Bank, so the head of the Nazi bank, was a major part of the directive committee of the Bank of International Settlements and their development. In fact, they also had Emil Pool, the vice president of the Reich Bank, and Emil Pool says that the Bank of International Settlements is the first, last, and only foreign branch of the Reich Bank. It is the continuation of what we saw during World War II through the Nazi Party, and now we're seeing the manifestation of it all. And these are the individuals who took the gold from the teeth of Holocaust victims and stored it for the Nazi regime.
Wow.
They are the ones that are making all of this, like pushing digital IDs across Europe. So Denmark has a digital ID, Estonia a digital ID, all the way across Europe and into the Anglosphere with Britain. And when this is the thing, is I've listened to so many pundits say, well, yes, it could pass the House of Commons, but it's got so much negative publicity. Not many people are going along with it. It'll fail at the House of Lords. My take on it is different. What they need is something that I believe they're already preparing for, which is a major catastrophe. The last time in Britain that we had a papers, please moment was during World War II. Well, if you look at the coalition of willing in which Keir Starmer signed up to, that are putting boots on the ground in Ukraine to fight Russia, and France saying that we need to prepare the hospitals in France by March 2026 for a major world conflict. Well, if there's a world conflict by that, the opposition in government to any digital ID will be removed, and he will see that go into play. And the problem is, at the minute, his proposal is that get a digital ID, you can work. No digital ID, no work, right? How that's going to help someone coming in, how that's going to help stop an immigration or illegal immigration, I don't know. But it won't be long before it goes, well, that'll go for the welfare system, that'll go for your health system, that'll go for your NHS app. All of this will be integrated into one system. For me, we had talked about digital IDs before, and I had said they were using the carrot and the stick, motive, right? They were trying to entice people, and the stick was coming. I didn't think the stick would come so severe, so fast. However, it makes an awful lot of sense when you hear the war rhetoric, the continual catastrophic warnings that are coming out, that this is coming.
Wow. So this is absolutely fascinating, Pastor Gary's. Yuri Bezmenov was a Soviet defector. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but it was an interview he did many years ago. And he said there's 4 things the Soviets would do to take over a people. The first thing is demoralize. Well, that's happened in Europe and the U.S. Then you destabilize. And then he said, which we see happening really there, totally happening there, and they're doing everything they can to destabilize this nation. And then you create a crisis. And you just mentioned catastrophe, this war. And I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking this is exactly the plan that's laid out. Because once you create the crises, you remove all opposition, even the people will say, save us. And then he says you come in and normalize, and as he says, you plant the big brother government because now the people are compliant. And what you're describing also, you said by March 2026. Well, why do they say that? That leads me to believe they already have the time frame. This is when we're going to create this catastrophe. And here in the U.S., we're hearing, I'm sure you heard about it, there's the threats of these major terror attacks that are going to happen in several big cities across the U.S., and it's coming soon. So getting prepared for it. But you start, just what you're saying is like, wait a minute. That's the plan that has been there. You talked about Nazi Germany. I didn't know all of those things regarding international, the Bank of Settlements, the connection with the Nazis. So you just mentioned this is very fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
So
sorry, Karen. It's spiritual. Heinrich Himmler was massively influenced by Madame Blavatsky. So he was originally a theosophist, then created Ariosophy. He was the one, so he was like the false prophet of the Nazi regime. He was the one who recognized that their original goal wasn't going to happen. And he prepared for it. And he prepared for it through the Friends of the Fuhrer. And it was the Friends of the Fuhrer who were these financial contributors that were all gathered together to start the Bank of International Settlements.
Man, this is totally fascinating. All right, so we have this. You have an Online Safety Act. We see everything go in the direction you're just saying. You have the Online Safety Act, which essentially takes away free speech. Mm-hmm. So I look, okay, if I want to travel to the UK, whenever that is, maybe a year from now, it's eventually going to happen, Lord willing. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't know when the rapture is going to happen or whatever, but eventually I'll be thinking in my mind, okay, I got to get over there. I know Billy Crone's been asking me to come, and Brandon and them, so I will eventually get there, Lord willing. If we work this out a year down the road, you're looking, wait a minute, are we going to be able to go to Europe without the threat of, well, you're not compliant, we've watched you on, all your things are all over social media, no, you're not allowed in here. I mean, I see the door closing to being able to do what we continually do.
Yeah, and not just the UK, it will be across Europe. And I know that you guys have done tours across Europe. You know, you've done part of a conference tour. This new European Act comes in on October 12th. So this will be, you know, because my wife and I were talking about it, because we've got this Icelandic conference coming up. You have to queue up. It's apparently going to cause havoc throughout the airports, but you have to queue up. You have to present your 4 fingers for your fingerprints. Take the scan, which they've been doing for a while, you know, with your face, but it's all being linked to a central European hub. Now that to me is the difference. When they start to centralize the data, it is for a specific nefarious purpose.
And it has to be centralized in order to bring about Revelation 13, the system that's coming. And, you know, you mentioned something very interesting a little bit ago. What's coming is from these tech leaders that are in the U.S. The Larry Ellison, Peter Thiel, the rest, and they're all part of Trump's team. And, you know, you look at it, and they're people that wouldn't have aligned. I mean, we're pushing against these people over the last 5 years. And Larry Ellison and Barack Obama are like best friends. And now we have Larry Ellison being buddies with Trump, and this stuff's coming into the UK. I look at it like it's everything as we watch what's happening with Israel that is coming from all the Australia, Canada, obviously you guys, France, and the rest. We see that. It's not a surprise, but we know the Bible tells us that. As we watch it, it's like America is going to, it's being set up here. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. But so America, in a sense, is still a holdout, but we are being conditioned. We're being conditioned on the Israel part, and we're being conditioned to the tech part. You're just leading, you're just leaders. You're like the tip of the spear on this. Australia is going to go as soon as you go.
Yeah, but for me, it's extremely interesting because, like you said, these tech giants are primarily, you know, centralized in Silicon Valley. They somehow, and we don't, you know, I would love to be a fly on the wall, but they're somehow infiltrated into the Trump administration. And I think it's come under the guise of the artificial intelligence arms race, the idea of getting to this destination of being the superior power when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I know that Trump is all in on that. But then you have the likes of, you know, Sam Altman, Larry Ellison, Peter Thiel, like Peter Thiel's Palantir. What they seem to be doing, and you know, if you were to sort of guise that the 10 king system could be a 10, let's say a 10 technocracy, or a technocratic system, as opposed to like kings of, you know, royal lineage, but rather a technocratic system, I think what we're seeing is the test beds being used around the world, and it's coming out of those individuals. Palantir, for instance, from Peter Thiel, is used within our NHS service here. And what does Palantir do? It observes, it surveils, and it basically consumes all of the data. So it's making an algorithm about you, everybody else, to know exactly what we're about. So freedom in terms of the worldly sense is being eradicated for the form of control. And true freedom is only found in Christ. So that is where, I liken it to we're all entering in to be like a Paul, where he considered himself an ambassador in Christ in the midst of chains. We're seeing that the global hand closing upon society. But it seems to be that these technocrats are testing out the infrastructure or building the infrastructure for what we know is going to be the Revelation 13 scenario. I also find it, by and by, it's probably off the charts a little bit, but Peter Thiel has called it Palantir. He has also started a stablecoin company called Arabir. They're both from The Lord of the Rings. Caveat, I love The Lord of the Rings, always did. However, I know that Tolkien was probably prone not so much to Christianity, although that's what we all accept, but in his later interviews, he was more of a Rosicrucian, which is all about esoteric teachings, Kabbalistic teachings. It's not Christianity. It's more in line with probably what we would say as theosophy or Luciferianism, and he was sort of led down that route. And Peter Thiel has named those things, and then he goes, I'm going to teach everybody about the Antichrist. And he's got this some sort of revelation about, I can do a 4-part lecture on the Antichrist. And I remember watching the interview with him, and the interviewer says, yeah, you're going to talk about the Antichrist, but is this not the system that you're building? And he was like, oh, no. And then he started to stutter. And I was looking at that and going, it is absolutely either complete and utter ignorance, or it's nefarious in nature. They know what they're doing. And when you look at the infrastructure that is being built through Oracle, through Palantir, that the whole world is going to be observed, you look at those street preachers, and we street preach. Now what Oracle and Palantir are partnering with is real-time facial recognition that is being used in the streets in the UK. So you're caught in a camera in London, for instance, is the most surveilled place in the world. So you're caught on a camera and it pops up, oh, that guy is preaching the Bible. Now, it won't be long before that becomes a real no outlawed system. And this is where we enter into that beast system.
Wow, man, everything you're describing is like it's here, but the people just haven't gone along with it. You bring a big enough catastrophe, the governments and the people will go along with it. I mean, this is just very fascinating, very informative. Gary, you have a book. I meant to bring it up in the beginning of the program. I forgot. But it's called Guardians at the Gate. End Times Equipping the Church. Before we wrap up here, what's your book about and why'd you write it?
Yeah, so it's a spiritual warfare book, but it's see, I know that we're waiting for our blessed hope, but I don't believe that waiting in the Christian sense is pew sitting. I don't believe that we're meant to just sit there and just kick up our feet. So this book is about noticing the strategies of the demonic, noticing the strategies of principalities, how to deal with those on a real basis, how to actually walk this out. But it goes into everything from ancient Irish mythology to world history, and then we just it's all tied together with Scripture. So my belief is that when you see the Genesis 6 fall, you have the B'nai Ha Elohim, the sons of God, fall. Then we go to Genesis 11 and the languages are split. So what we see is that narrative of what they teach, through trying to deceive the world, continues throughout every culture in the world. And it is colloquially known as paganism. It carries that narrative of the Nephilim, narrative of the Watchers, and that is taught through the ages. And the counter to that is the truth of Jesus Christ, is the truth of the gospel. So it's how to recognize those different strategies, how to stand against paganism, how to stand against the wickedness of the age and not be a pew sitter. So the theory about it is that Matthew 16:18, when Jesus says that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, when the church becomes complacent, this is me adding to it, not adding to scripture, just giving you a summary. Whenever the church is complacent about it, I believe that what you see is a spiritual crack of the gates of hell. And that's why you see the atmosphere like it is.
Wow. How can people get a hold of your book?
The best way is Amazon. You can buy it straight off the church, but or straight off me, but it's much easier with international shipping just to get it off Amazon.
Yep. Pastor Gary, it's been great having you on today. Looking forward to seeing you in Oklahoma in just a couple of days. And it's going to be terrific. And friends, that was just an outstanding time. I want to encourage you to like and share and subscribe this, but also check out everything that Pastor Gary has. You've been seeing it pop up, how to get a hold of him in the description the whole time we've been talking. You also have it in the description now, so you can go there. Please do. As you can tell, you're going to be very well informed. You're going to get it. So check out Pastor Gary. God bless you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.